Right, thank you very much to Alicia. Well, the Reserve Bank, in case you've just missed it, the Governor, Lesitja Kganyago, says that the Monetary Policy Committee has decided to leave the repo rate on hold at 7%, meaning that the prime lending rate stays unchanged at 10.5%. The decision was widely expected. Inflation remains within the upper limit of the bank's 3 to 6 target band, and the economy is expected to show very little growth this year. And to discuss this, well, breaking news is that the Directors of Business Leadership South Africa, BLSA, have called on the government to deal with concerns about the threats to the Treasury and the financial sector by ensuring that the inquiry relating to SARS is conducted by credible and appropriate institutions such as the Public Protector, whose mandate is to investigate maladministration and abuse of power in the state affairs. The BLSA is considering national development since their open letter addressed to President Jacob Zuma on the 24th of August. In this letter, they expressed grave concerns about the state's actions that appeared to target the finance minister. So now, to discuss this and other related matters to today's announcement, we welcome in the studio the Managing Director of Lihumo Capital, Mr. Maudi Lintswane. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. The story that I've just read right now talks about the concerns that have been expressed regarding the finance minister looking and seemingly being a target here and the government needing to do something in the open letter that we have alluded to. What do you think about this?
No, certainly. I think, business has become very impatient with how things, have been done, particularly this political risks that we've alluded to over the past couple of weeks. The fact of the matter is it's not helping. The political tension that we've seen, it's causing a lot of problems for the South African economy. And it's an issue that can be addressed and dealt with in a proper manner. And I think what business is suggesting, it's absolutely correct that if there's any wrongdoing from the minister's side, it needs to be investigated in a proper manner by the organizations or the institutions that are mandated to do so. So I think it's valid, and it's one that has to be addressed swiftly because it has impacted negatively on the South African economy. And for as long as it continues, we will continue to see this negativity.
The impression that has been created was that on the negative side, the rogue unit was conducting clandestine investigative activities. On the other hand, the analysts who are saying, no, a unit like that was needed because of the high level of, illicit cash outflows out of the country and, some investigation that needed to be done, which was sensitive, and it needed to be done by a specialized unit. So then to strike a balance on this, what does it say about what analysts call a political noise that is affecting the rand, which tends to lose its value when there is so much happening regarding the imminent arrest of the finance minister? And then when the whole thing quietens down, the rand seems to be recovering. Looks like this axis is actually affecting the currency.
Look, I think we're just going back into the reasons and how the unit was formed. The fact of the matter is the unit was formed, but it would appear just off the face value that perhaps some of the manner in which it was formed, there were a couple of questions, and there are certain valid questions being raised. Remember, there are processes. If a unit like that is going to be formed, it has to be formed by the following proper procedures. In other words, there should not be any rights of South Africans that must be violated by this unit, whether right or wrong in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So if there's a wrongdoing on the side of the minister, it has to be investigated, but it has to be done in a proper manner. At this point in time, it looks like there are lots of questions being raised as to the motives, one, and also as to the procedure that are being followed. So we need to go back and say, what is the proper manner in which this has to be conducted? And if the minister has done something wrong, he needs to account for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, let us go back to the news of the day regarding the Reserve Bank leaving the rate unchanged. The MPC has decided now, looking at domestic factors, especially with regards to CPI, remaining within the target band of the Reserve Bank's envisaged level of between 3 and 6%. Well, what do you make out of this if we're having the inflation outlook expected to be high at the moment?
Look, for, what happened, this afternoon? Yes, we saw the numbers that came out yesterday. Inflation coming back within that the 3 to 6% band. Good news, primarily because we've seen over the past couple of months the rand strengthen. We've also seen the oil price somehow come down. That has helped quite significantly. But when you really punch in the inflation numbers that we saw yesterday, and you look at the food inflation remains excessively high. And I mean, I think that's the crux of the matter. Is the fact that, yes, we've seen the inflation come down within the target band, but you've still got inflationary pressures when it comes to the most important ones, which is the food inflation. So we're not out of the woods yet, and I think that's what the governor made mention of the fact that, yes, there is a positive movement, but however, we are still looking at pressures that are being exerted into particularly the food basket. So until that is really sorted out, we are still going to remain excessively high.
Now, looking at the status quo regarding the pressures on job numbers, we're not creating jobs, and secondly, the economy being forecast at 0%. Things are not looking good, as you are saying. We're not out of the woods yet. Now, the issue of the GDP figures coming at 3.3%, and the question being, would we expect that sustainable and strong growth in the future, especially looking at the third quarter?
I think it looks positive for now. It looks like we are certainly on a very, we managed to avoid the recession. We've had negative GDP numbers in the first quarter. The second quarter was very impressive. And we're starting to see some positive signs that we could continue in that positive note. And I think if we go back to the statement by the governor this afternoon, he made mention of the fact that they've now revised the growth from 0%, which is what the projections were, to now 0.4%. So it tells you that they are starting to beginning to see the green shoots, that the economy is not looking as bad as it was a couple of months ago. So there are those positive. We saw that the current account deficit that also was recorded an improvement. So if we continue to see this kind of improvement, perhaps we might be able to look much better. Looking at
the, like the domestic factors, they're quite optimistic for now, but on the, in the short term.
Yes.
Now, when we get out of the country, looking at the exogenous factors, the issue of the impact that was expected regarding Brexit, and secondly, the Federal Reserve not increasing their interest rate, where does then put us in the fourth quarter? Because analysts are saying that we could be seeing a rate hike in the last quarter of the year, but then the U.S. is wary of a strong dollar because it may hamper their growth.
No, certainly. I think what is happening in the country, by and large, particularly from a central bank point of view, is driven by and large, to a larger degree, by what's happening outside of this country. Elsewhere in the world, central banks have embarked on a accommodative monetary policy. You go to Japan, the same thing is happening. In the U.S. with the Fed is looking to normalize the monetary policy. The fact of the matter is they cannot stay at 0 levels for a very long time, because that, in the long run, will impact negatively on the savers. People in the U.S. are not encouraged to save. So let's not confuse the interest rates hike. It's not a bad thing in the U.S. It's normalization, which is necessary. But when it comes to, yes, it's going to have also a bit of a negative impact in the short term for South Africa, especially emerging markets as well. But it's something that has to take place, and it was to be expected, particularly after such a long period of a low interest rates environment. The patient cannot continue to be on this life support machine forever.
Well, it looks like we've run out of time, but I believe that in my future discussion, we will be discussing issues in relation to investments in the volatile economic environment. Things have not been looking good, 0% projection, and now changing to 0.4% growth. So if things change like this, what does an investor do when we have this kind of outlook? But then that's for our future discussion. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Managing Director of Lihumo Capital, Mr. Maudu Lenzwani, talking to us about the analysis of the decision of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Well, it's been a pleasure doing business with you, and it's a ciao ciao.